when we set out to start the company, when we were, a couple people in a house with a pitch deck, we said, we're going to build America's power company. We're going to change the way the industry works. To say that as a couple people in a house with a pitch deck is like totally insane, right?
Still insane now.
It's still totally
We're going to look
insane.
back on this factory someday and say we were
totally
insane at that time.
We're in Austin, across the lake from downtown Skyline and the neon signs of South Congress, where a factory is taking shape inside a former newspaper press. Headlines used to roll off these floors, and soon batteries will. At Terrain, we partnered with Zach Dell and Justin Lopez early in their journey to build Base and fix America's grid. Just 2 years later, we're here at Base Factory 1 to talk about energy innovation, building hardware in America, and moving fast with a talent-dense team. This is Base Power, America's power company.
You haven't seen it yet.
I have not. It's so big. That's incredible.
You approve?
It's perfect. That is fucking crazy.
Tell me a bit about the environment of Austin. We're sitting right here on the river across from downtown. How the city plays a role in the company and the culture that you're creating, the idea of hardware in a place like this.
I'm biased. I grew up here, but I think Austin is the greatest city in the world.
Cole said you say that a lot.
I do, yeah. When I grew up here, it felt a lot more like a small town. Now it feels closer to a big city, and I think that's some of the magic that Austin brings. Is it has the community and the culture of a small town, and it has the resources and the opportunity of a big city. And I think you'll find that Austin is a place where there are a lot of companies that are building in the built environment, particularly because it's a really good place to do business, and it's less regulatory oversight. There's more freedom to do things.
It accepts the idea that you can make it what you want it, and I think that's a really uniquely American and uniquely Texas idea.
A place like Texas, there's a lot of people who listen to you and say, okay, yeah, we've seen that before. Like that's interesting. How are you going to do it? How's it going to work? What about this? What about that? Right? Texas leads the country in renewables and fossil fuel generation, right? So it's just the energy capital of the country. And so as we looked at, where do we start the business? Texas was the obvious place to do that. Now, of course, Austin has a place in my heart, and but it really was coming from this perspective of, okay, Texas is the energy capital of the world. It's the laboratory for energy technology. Austin is the best place to build a technology company in Texas, and we can talk more about this. I think we honestly think of ourselves more of a technology company competing in the domain of energy than an energy company that uses technology.
Why do you think that matters? What's significant about that?
Because I think our DNA, I think company DNA is a real thing, right? When you walk into the office, like, what do you feel? What do you see, right? And if you look at the energy industry today, part of the problem is that the DNA of most of the incumbents is not engineering-led. It's finance-led. Right. So you walk into their offices and they're high-rise buildings and everyone's in a suit and tie and they're on spreadsheets. You walk into our office and I'm wearing a button-down today because I've got an event tonight, but I'm largely wearing a t-shirt and there's engineering happening on the floor and people are in CAD and writing software and it's not a I have my own fondness for spreadsheets as a finance person, recovering finance person maybe, but it's not a finance-led organization. And so I think the DNA of the company, how you approach problems, right? Do you throw money at the problem? Do you think about how do we structure this in a spreadsheet? Or do you actually go solve it with engineering? And that is how we approach problem solving.
Talk to me a bit about why this co-location, why having a factory makes sense at all. It's a huge undertaking, obviously.
We compete in a commodity business, as we like to say. There are no sexy electrons, right? And our view is that the best electron is the cheapest electron. And we can talk about how lower cost electrons enable new kinds of technologies to pencil and more innovation to happen and humanity to prosper, frankly. But I think people understand that concept broadly. So the idea here is that through vertically integrating, we can take cost out of adding energy to the grid. We can generate higher returns at the asset level and pass those returns on to the customer in form of lower prices, right? So the vertically integrated strategy really enables our competitive advantage, which is price. The value in having engineering and manufacturing co-located is incredibly high, partially because if something breaks on the line, the engineer that's designing the product or that's designing the line can walk over and take a look. They don't have to get in the car, they don't have to get on a plane, right? Also because the person who's designing the product can talk to the manufacturing engineer that's working on the line, and they can collaborate in real time. Also, because all the folks that are working on the product, maybe in design or in software or in business development, they can see how the thing is made, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so it just compounds learnings to have everything close together. It creates a really tight feedback loop, and we think it's a really huge advantage.
Every time I come down to Austin and see you guys, there's a joy that is, tangible among the team. That's not something that can be contrived. It's also not something that can kind of come top down. What do you think it is about the group of people that, brings that kind of energy into work, where they're, excited to be going to work in the morning, excited to, have dinner together?
I think we really value fun, which is not something that companies talk about valuing, but we like to have fun. We enjoy coming to work. We crack jokes in meetings.
I heard you guys did a go-karting inside of this before it was
we did some go-karting.
Yeah.
We did it outside, not inside.
Okay.
There were no, OSHA violations.
Got
It was
it.
all
right.
up to
Inside would
code.
be pretty cool. Yeah.
We like to have fun, right? Like we do 996. We just don't talk about it like that because it's, what we do is a couple things. One, when we interview people, we set expectations that this is going to be really hard and it's going to be kind of all-consuming. And if you're not someone who wants to really immerse yourself in your work, like you're just not going to have fun here. Yeah. Two is like we hire people that we like to spend time with, and that sounds at face value, it's like, oh, so you just like hire your friends? No, that's not what I'm saying. We hire people that have the kind of attitude that is positive, that is energetic. They bring energy into conversations, and they're happy to be there, right? They look at problems and they get excited. Mm-hmm. They're not like dejected and sad when things don't go their way. They know it's going to be hard. They expect to run into challenges, and I think there's a difference between taking yourself seriously and taking your work seriously. We take our work really seriously. We take ourselves not that seriously, right? Yeah. So people make fun of me all the time. I make fun of them back. We crack jokes. There's inside jokes. We like to have fun.
How do you, you're having a pitch with a prospective recruit or someone that you want to hire, what's the story you tell them to come to Base to work on, as you said, like unsexy electrons?
Well, I think there's a really strong draw to work on problems that really matter and, work on something that you're proud to tell your friends about, your wife about, your husband about, your grandkids about, right? And I think Base qualifies, deeply in that regard. It also is a place where you are surrounded by extremely intelligent, hardworking people that also really care about the mission and have a really kind of deep desire and hunger to solve problems and iterate and make improvements and kind of get better together. So I'd say, how do we convince people to join Base? I think there are really three things. One is the team, the culture, and being at Base is really freaking fun. The second kind of bucket of reasons is the best people want to be working on hard problems with other really smart people, right? And there is a basically never-ending list of really hard things that we got to go figure out. Back to this point of get in the game and then stay in the game and go find other problems to solve. There are so many things in the energy ecosystem that we can go do that people are really excited about. And you don't have this problem of, we ran out of hard problems to solve and now there's nothing interesting to go work on. So there's kind of a never-ending list there. And then the third bucket, you brought up economics, and I think, look, like, are we paying people what OpenAI and Meta are paying people? No, we're not, right? We're not that kind of business. But the opportunity in front of us is incredibly, incredibly large, right? Like electricity is, or energy is one of the biggest parts of the economy. And there's, $1 trillion of revenue to go after, just in the US and another 4 or 5 trillion of revenue across the world. And, again, I say this with humility and respect for the game, but if we're successful, I think we could build one of the biggest companies on the planet. And there's top-down math and bottom-up math, and I can run you through it. But I think this is a massive economic opportunity for people, who join today, who join in a year, who join in 5 years. It's that large of an opportunity that you can check all the boxes, right? You can have, the financial upside that people are looking for. You can have endlessly interesting problems and a kind of never-ending list of those. And then you can have like a freaking fun and rewarding and challenging day-to-day, which I think a lot of people are looking for.
We've talked about that as like base pace, which is that, both the parallel ownership of these verticals that have, a lot of complexity within them, but then a shared set of responsibility and collaboration throughout them. As you've gone, I don't know, 2 years ago, this whole operation and HQ across the street was out of a house. What has been the, I'd say, biggest learning of instilling that in the culture as it's grown to how many employees now?
About 220.
Wow.
When you're building in this vertically integrated way, the constraint is probably you in some way, right? So if you're relying on counterparties and the counterparty slows you down, there's often not a lot you can do. You're like, well, we have to wait until they give us the thing and then we can go do this other thing. But the way that we decided to start the company in the deregulated part of the market was oriented around this idea that we could just go execute quickly, and the only thing slowing us down was us. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of pressured each other to move faster, right? And so you know about the turtle, but for those who aren't aware, we have a literal physical turtle. And the turtle goes on the desk of the person of the team that is the constraint in the business. And it's not a source of shame. Yeah. It's actually a source of pride, because if you never carry the turtle, you're probably not working on something that's all that important, right? And so the turtle moves across the desks as the constraint moves. And so instead of going to third parties to solve our problems, you go across the office and you're like, hey, can you please do this thing? Because I'm trying to, hit my number, or I'm trying to get to my goal. And it just creates this like strong team orientation where when you run into an issue, you don't go outside the company, you go to inside the company, you go to a different team or a different part of the business. And I think that kind of creates this concept of base pace, which is this strong orientation towards action and this bias towards speed.
How do you create a brand that fills people's imagination, both the team of coming to work on this mission, but also of customers who have been sold power forever, right? It's not, it's a 100-plus-year-old technology, the grid, that people don't look at, as a thing that they choose.
I think in a lot of ways, brand is the feeling that people have when they interact with the product, right? And so that is both the literal things they see, the buttons they touch, the way the product works, but also the interactions with your team, right? When things go poorly, how are those issues resolved? And back to the technology point, is like technology is infused into all those things, right? And in our category, I don't want to say it's easy, but there's a real opportunity to differentiate in that feeling that you have when you interact with your power company on the vector of technology to make that experience a lot better for the customer. Said differently, you don't often hear people say, man, I love my power company. Right? We're going to change that. Our customers do say that. Yeah. And they say that because our technology is better, our support team is better, our visual design is better, the actual product is better, the prices are lower, and all those things are connected.
I think a lot about nominative determinism for these companies, right? And I know Base was kind of a quick decision in the name, but do you think it impacts how you think about the infrastructure level ambition of the company as a foundational technology to power homes and data centers and EVs and rocket launches down the line? Like, tell me about how those things connect to where you are today and where you want to go.
Yeah, our view is that energy is the last great part of the economy that's gone undisrupted. It touches everything, right? It flows through our homes, our schools, our factories, and really, our future, right? We can't do anything without it. And, this is a bit of a tangent, but bear with me. One thing I talked about with the team, and I could get the exact number wrong, so, folks are welcome to fact check me, but if you look at the average age of the companies in the S&P 500, it's like roughly 40 years. So what that tells you is if you want to do really well, which I would categorize S&P 500 as doing pretty well, you just got to stay in the game. Right? And so step one is like build a really financially sustainable core business model, a strong balance sheet, and an incredibly strong team. And then if you happen to be in a big market, which I'd argue that energy is the biggest, and you have those three things figured out, the possibilities, the problems you can solve in that space are endless, right? So you can go downstream into the home, and maybe one day we do sell premium products into the home, right? There's all kinds of stuff downstream of the electric meter, basically every load in the home that we can go touch, and I'll just leave it there. Yeah. Then you go upstream into the utility infrastructure and you work on substations and transformers and software and all kinds of things for users of large amounts of energy. You talk about data centers and factories, and we also think about multifamily buildings and quick serve restaurants and gas stations and grocery stores. So the way we think about it is build a really financially sustainable core business strong balance sheet, strong team,
Right.
and then go, stay in the game
Yeah.
and go fight to take market share in different parts of the energy ecosystem.
You made this point of these 40, 50-year-old companies that occupy the S&P 500, and even some of the tech giants are now kind of in that range. As you take that then to the team, and as you build a team, how do you think about the longevity of having someone feel fulfilled and driven at base and have their ambitions met for 10, 15, 25 years? I think, you had told me once that, it was one of the biggest points of pride for your dad with his company, that there are people that have had their whole careers there and have, reached incredible heights alongside the company.
So I think, first principles here, like, what do people look for in a job? What do they care about, right? A mission that matters, colleagues that they enjoy working with, and work that is challenging and inspiring. And so we try to make sure those things are equal true for everyone, right? Now, our mission, I think, is particularly inspiring, and most folks find it very easy to get excited about our mission, right? It's like, do you care about helping people save money on electricity and keep their lights on?
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy yes there. 2, we've talked a lot about hiring and the quality of our team and our talent bar, and so it is our responsibility to keep that bar high, so that, if you joined at 20 people, 50 people, 70 people, 100 people, 150 people, and the talent bar was really high at all those levels, and then it starts to drop, the likelihood of you leaving goes up significantly, because the average talent
Quality that's around
gets
you.
diluted,
Yeah.
right? And so that's a really big piece of it. And then let's say all we ever do is home batteries in Texas, right? That's really exciting, and you could build a $100 billion company doing that, and happy to walk you through that math, right? But there's so much more out there. We talked about going downstream, going upstream, going into other states. And so the best people, they want to work on interesting, novel problems. And so if you don't have this really ambitious kind of plan that says, hey, we're going to go do X, Y, and Z, new product, new market, new problem, this is how we're going to further our mission, the best people will just get bored and leave, right? So you have to always kind of have new, interesting stuff for them to work on.
There's no stop in you, right? It's something that I saw, when we worked together in our, previous job, and, now as a, early backer at Base, and being able to work closely together. The best entrepreneurs become their category, become their product. Walk me through, as you were sitting at the precipice of starting this company, and as many people will be sitting at the precipice of considering joining this company, how energy captivated you, and just your thoughts on the need to do that to be successful in this world as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I would say I'm incredibly lucky and just blessed to have grown up in the way that I did, and get to watch an entrepreneur and my dad build a company in the way that he did. And I got to just learn a lot about what that journey is like. And one of the most salient learnings from that experience was seeing the computer industry take over his life in a way that brought him a ton of joy and energy, to the point where, he is excited and willing to talk about computers and servers and data centers any time of day, 365, 24/7. Like, we could be on vacation or, late at night, early in the morning. It doesn't matter. Like, this is a topic that he wants to talk about. And, he immediately perks up with energy and excitement when, this subject matter gets brought up, right? And so if you're going to build a company and you're going to do it for 5 years and you're going to get to, XYZ scale, and then you're going to sell it and move on, like, this is not required, right? But if you're going to build a business and it's going to be your life's work, and you're going to put a 50-year run into something, or 25-year run into something, you got to be willing to make that your identity. And it needs to be something sufficiently interesting, at least this is how I thought about it, that you are willing to make your life, right? If we were going to go build Beanie Babies or whatever, the Labubu, this new thing that I've recently learned about, I don't particularly care about stuffed animal toys, right? And so I'd have a really hard time being the stuffed animal toy guy. But energy is really freaking interesting. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's competitive, it's quantitative, it's physical, it's capital intense, and it's
as a mix of engineering and finance and customer
regulatory,
experience,
brand. It's endlessly interesting. And so when I was looking at opportunities, and really, as was like wanting to start a company for a long time, was kind of studying different paradigm shifts and things to build into. And I saw this kind of paradigm shift in energy, which, you know, I described as the last 50 years have been defined by coal and natural gas. The next 50 years will be defined by solar and storage. And I kind of saw that happening. I said, okay, well, energy is something that I actually would be really excited to spend the rest of my life thinking about. And what's interesting is when you are, you know, a CEO or a co-founder and you're starting your company, people, you know, you're in social settings and people want to ask about the company, and then people will apologize and be like, oh, I'm sorry, you probably don't want to talk about this right now. And you've probably heard me say this. I'm like, no, like,
no, let's go.
It's exactly what I want to talk about. I will talk about this all day long until you're blue in the face. Because like, this is, you know, my wife, like, she knows when I get home from work, I'm not like, oh, please, babe, like, don't ask me about, you know, I'm like, oh my God, I have to tell you about this thing that happened. And remember, I was talking about this morning. Well, this happened and we learned this new thing. And like, can you believe that, you know, this partner, you know, told us this. And so you have to get just like endless energy from the subject matter, or else you're not, you know, competing with someone that's just having fun is like hard. And
really
like,
hard.
we are having fun. And I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. And we're not doing it because we feel like we have to, because we want to make XYZ dollars, but we find it endlessly interesting and fun. And I think that is the best that is the best source of energy out there.
I feel like this was golden.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for doing it, coming down here, and everything you do for the company.
It's always a good time.
I can't believe this sign. It's like,
it's so cool.